Hey everyone, it's Sam. Since we talked about transitions last time, we wanted to focus on transitions in relationships today, whether that's you being left as a friend or you doing the leaving. We also talk about DTRing as friends and not beating around the bush. Hope you enjoy. All right, well, we're back for another episode. So I know last time we spent some time talking about just our own transitions and how we've dealt with transitions, but today let's kind of tie it back maybe into relationship transitions, whether that's friendships, romantic ones, or familial ones. I guess I will start first. I don't know, it's like been over or almost 10 years since college. Kind of crazy. So I know like both Francis and I, we were like affiliated with Greek and Greek life, you know.
Best time of my life.
Yeah, but I think maybe kind of feels like low-hanging fruit, but maybe we can kind of talk about that, because I was thinking, yeah, right, I had, including myself, I had 8 pledge brothers in my class. For those of you that aren't aware, it's like every semester or quarter, whatever, you go through initiation, and then you have a group of guys or girls that you end up crossing with, and then those are like your pledge, it's your pledge class, right? So there was 8 of us. And of course, during college, you're like, oh, dude, we're gonna be friends forever.
Friends for life.
Like, these are my ride or dies, whatever. But now I'm like, oh, hasn't even been 10 years since we graduated. I'm pretty sure I only talked to like 1 or 2 of them, if at all, regularly, at least, I don't know, once a month. And then the others, I'm just like, I have no clue what they're up to. Yeah, Francis, what has it been like for you?
I mean, same. We had a pledge class of 10. Unfortunately, we disowned 2 right off the bat, so they were not part of our group. But it's 8 of them, including me. And we actually had our 10-year friendship anniversary last year, as well as like which is also our pledge class reunion. And I mean, the fact that we had talked about doing a 10-year reunion trip and like really planning something special for all of us, and it didn't happen, goes just to show what Sam's point is. And I think for us, like, there's 8 girls, there's 4 of us that are in NorCal and 4 in SoCal. And so the 4 of us in NorCal were actually pretty tight. And I can honestly say those are my ride or die lifetime friends. And then the other 4, I consider myself to be friends with them still, but we just haven't had that much interaction. So I think, you know, we're still there for each other when we, like, for big things and stuff, but I think the friendships definitely have changed a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and even you mentioning NorCal, SoCal, kind of just moving after graduation, like, even for me, right, I was at Berkeley, so a lot of my college friends, they ended up living in SF. I didn't want to live in SF, but you think, oh, it's only a 40-minute gap.
Yeah.
And that's not too bad, but I'm like, I never want to go into SF to go see people. Yeah, what was it like for like your friends, I guess, after graduation?
Man, I feel like I'm like trying to think. You guys are mentioning at least you guys still keep in touch with them. I'm like, who do I still keep in touch with from college? You know, it's really only one friend that I keep in touch with. I mean, I was probably closest with my nursing class, and the friends that I had there. And even though some of us actually work in the same hospital right now, but because we're on just different units, I don't even talk to them or see them. I've literally followed their life through, you know, their social media. Which is, now that I think about it, kind of sad, but it's true. Like, it's just, I feel like as I get older, I also realize that like relationships become more functional because we just have less time, or as your responsibilities grow, you really just have to make an effort to like keep in touch with people. And yeah, out of all my college friends, I think I only really keep in touch with one, and that's like maybe once or twice a year that we hang out, and that's already like really good.
Well, I mean, even for that, I wonder, like, do you feel like you guys, when you do hang out, you are able to just kind of catch up without missing a beat?
I think it depends on who. I think now the ones that I like probably don't catch up with, I actually probably just don't even see them. The ones that I do still hang out with, I feel like we just pick up where we left off. And yeah, and then I think there's just some friends that they just, you know, life looks different, but like things don't, like, they're internally the same person. And I really truly appreciate those friendships and relationships because you know, it's refreshing to be like, you know, you're still the same person that I like became friends with, like whatever season of life I was in.
Yeah, I think there's the part of it too, though, like that you mentioned where, oh, our relationships now are a lot more functional. But then I'm like, no, don't tell me that I was only good friends because it was like convenient to be friends, or that because we were always around each other.
Yeah.
But it's probably the sad truth.
Yeah, it is. I think it's one of those things also though that I think makes me appreciate the people around me that are currently in my life too, because I feel like in this new season, like because we are around each other, like we are more like we like because we're like in this like working functional relationship, there's also like joys that come with that because we relate to each other on a deeper level as you like go through life challenges and life changes and season changes together.
Yeah, because I know it's also like just it's almost like as we are growing up to the threshold for like what we want to share is like higher in the sense of like if we were hanging out and I was like, oh hey, what have you been up to? What's new? I feel like for me, my theory is that outside of let's say a new relationship, a new job, and then like baby, car, house, there's no real updates, right? Because then you don't really talk about, oh yeah, I spent 40 hours last week watching this new show, or like, oh yeah, I picked up. Maybe I guess if you're like super into a hobby, but other than that, I'm not too sure. But yeah, I think let's just kind of explore these friendships and relationships a bit more in the sense of like, did either of you, I guess, when you saw that these friendships are kind of maybe not the same quote unquote quality as they were before, like how did you react to that? Did you have any conversations with said parties to maybe try to counter the quote unquote diminishing friendship?
I think that's always really hard to do, to confront friendships that you feel like are not equal or not working at the moment. But I think what you were saying earlier, like I really feel like a lot of times it's, if you feel like a friendship is not working out the way you want or it's not as open, then like I know for me, then I don't share as much as I would, even if we're in a setting together. So yeah, I mean, I think even with my example that I was talking about earlier, yeah, there's a little bit of a line between like the of us up here and the four of us down there. We should talk about some things that like we have strife about with each other, but we haven't done that yet. And I think it's also just kind of tiptoeing, like still trying to keep the peace with everybody and still wanting to let them know that like, I'm not really mad at you, but these are some things that irritate, but just worry that they're going to take it the wrong way and make the friendship diminish even more.
Well, so I know like you mentioned how your group had 10, right? And then 2 already left. But like, so for my experience with, let's say like my pledge class, there was 8 of us, but then within 2 years, we kind of had to like disown one of them as well. But it was weird because it was like,
yikes.
I mean, it's serious, okay?
Yeah, it gets intense. It gets intense. It's like you break some rules and like they're not even really unspoken rules. They're kind of very explicit rules. And then
what rules?
Okay, so for us, like we have a little sis program.
Okay.
Right, and then the rule is like you don't date your own little sis.
Got it. Okay.
Right, like that's a huge no-no.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like as this little sis class coming along, like our former pledge row, we were like we kind of caught a whiff of it, and then I was like, yo, if you want, like I can be her big bro, so you can go do whatever.
You're such a good guy.
But he's like, oh no, nothing's happening and stuff, and we're like, all right. But then every time like me and some of the other guys would drive to the gym, like we would see his car in front of her apartment. So we're just like, okay. And then, yeah, it just became very obvious, like, that they were becoming a couple. And so then from that, it was weird because I think I was, like, back down south for, like, a weekend. And I guess there was, like, some blow up at the house. And then they ended up, he basically just kind of, like, deactivated, which is, you just, like, kind of quit the fraternity. But then, so I never actually had like a closure conversation with this guy until this other day, like in that same semester, like a month or 2 later, he like just shows up at the house, and I was like, what are you doing here? Like you left us, you can't be here. And also being like a young hothead, I was just like, dude, you broke the rules, like don't come here expecting us to kind of like welcome you back. And it's weird because they were still dating, so like nothing had changed on the quote unquote like rule breaking front.
Right.
But then I definitely don't think I handled it as best as I could because we were just like, all right, yo, you just can't be here. And then it's kind of sad because then since then it's just none of us interact with him at all. But it was weird because some of my like other friends from the fraternity, like they actually ended up moving into the same building as him, like in SF. So every now and then, like they would cross paths. So it's just like really awkward. So
Awkward, yeah.
it's like even more awkward than, right, like when you see an elementary school friend
Yeah.
or like former friend at the grocery store. You're just like, what do I do? Do I not talk to them at all?
Yeah.
Just like don't even
I'm gonna
acknowledge.
hide right now.
Yeah, right. Like, but then they're like in the same elevator going like up and down.
That's so awkward.
Like living like multiple times.
Yeah, so like multiple times because
encounter.
you're in the same apartment
Right.
building. Yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah, it gets like pretty intense, but I don't know if Iris, you had any very traumatic, serious, I guess, like blow ups like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but like intense blow-ups, but I mean, I think back to your question about like having those like hard conversations. I honestly feel like I'm in one right now, actually. And I don't really know how to navigate it because this person has been a long time friend. Like we've been friends for a really long time since high school. And but our life has, I think it's just a very classic example of like how our lives are just drifting apart. And I hope one day it'll come back together. But I think it has a lot to do with like life stage and just the way we went about our careers, and the way that we went about, you know, just like big life decisions. You know, like I'm obviously a mom now and she like is single, you know, and so, you know, our priorities just look very different right now. And it's not anybody's fault. And it's not like we both purposely did that to spite each other. But it's just like the, you know, just how life played out, you know, and, but I find ourselves like very, it's hard to relate now because yeah, our priorities are just different. And so every time we hang out, and we still do, and you know, I still consider her a dear friend, but the things that we can talk about, it's almost like I have to draw from the past or just be like, where's your next vacation, and talk about that. You know, there's just like a lot of like the things that are currently happening in my life right now. I feel like she probably doesn't really care to hear, you know, and, you know, vice versa. She probably feels the same for me. And I think we just don't know how to, I currently don't know how to like even have that conversation or to have that discussion with her. And I'm like, do I want to bring it up? Will this break it? I think there's a lot of like fear in my mind that, you know, I just can never go back to how things were before. And I think that scares me. So I just like tiptoe around it. But I feel like after every hangout that we have, it's unsatisfying because I feel like we don't get very deep anymore because we don't know like, yeah, how to get deep anymore. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm navigating that. I hope it never ends up in a blow up situation, but it's hard. And yeah, I feel like transitioning in relationships are just a hard thing. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like in my 20s, it was like, and then now in my 30s, like I went through two like moments where like in my 20s, it was like post college and you feel like you go through a transition there. And then in your 30s, you go through maybe another transition because of just like life. Maybe certain people got married, certain people didn't, or certain people started having families and certain people didn't. And that's another huge transition too. I don't know if you guys have felt kind of like the same feelings or had to navigate that.
I think for the marriage part, maybe not as much yet. I do know there was like some friends on Esther's side where, or I can think of one incident in particular where she's like, oh yeah, because now you're engaged, so I'm not going to be the same type of friend to you. Or like,
What does that mean?
It's like something along those lines. And Esther's very taken aback. And when she told me, I was like, what? Like, what kind of like philosophy?
friend?
Yeah.
Just
Is it?
kidding.
Yeah, it was like really weird. I don't know. Maybe we'll just have to have Esther come up and share about it herself. But yeah, for me, just hearing that, I'm just like, yes, things have changed because at this point we're engaged. But I felt like from a day to day, nothing really changed. It's like, right? I think even for both of you, like when you're engaged, even to when you're married, not much has changed yet. It's, I mean, only Iris can speak of is like, in my opinion, it's probably mostly when you have kids in terms of like your time suck and just time expenditure, right? Because then for us, I felt like, oh, once we got engaged, we were still doing our own individual activities.
Yeah.
It's not like we're with each other every day and different things like that. But yeah, I don't know about you, Francis, if you had anything like that.
Well, I just feel like friendships, they're not all friendships are meant to last forever, right? Like not to be like break you the bubble or anything, but I think there are lifelong friends, you know who they are. And then there's people that come and go in your life, like kind of like what you're saying, based off of phases and things. And I think it's okay. But I think sometimes people take it so personally when nothing's happened, that like, oh, you're not calling me as much, you're not hanging out with me as much. And it's like, but that doesn't change the love that I have for you, right? It's just that I'm going through something different and maybe you're going through something different. I don't know, like I am somebody that has a couple of different friendship circles. Do you guys have a lot of those, or like where you know it's like these are my lifelong and then these are like different like circles of people?
I mean, I think in like, I've thought about before where like in theory, yes, you're right. You have like your inner circle, then the circle gets gradually bigger and bigger. And then maybe with the inner circle, it's, hey, I don't need to see them every day of the week, but I know when I do see them, nothing has changed.
Right.
Right. And then maybe some of the other ones, it's, you don't go as deep in terms of conversations or just like the mutual bond and connection. So maybe it's more reliant on mutual interests and doing mutual activities and then going from there. But back to kind of what you said about not everyone's meant to be lifelong friends. I think that was like a really hard lesson for me because I took a lot of pride from because I moved around so much growing up. I was like, let's see, after 8th grade, so I moved from California to Taiwan, but I was still able to keep my friendships in California. And so I think that probably kind of created this identity for me where I'm like, oh, I'm like really good at holding on to my friendships. So then even when I came back for senior year of high school, I still had my same friends in middle school. But then one thing that like really sucked was all of a sudden my best friend, like towards the end of the year, we just kind of drifted. And I wish I was more mature back then to like have basically a DTR, be like, hey, yo, what's happening with us? Or like, how come we don't hang out anymore? But then it just kind of fell apart. And then I think it just kind of left a void.
Did something happen though? Or was it just, you know?
He just started hanging out with a different group of friends. And so like, so even for me and some of like our other friends in the original group, was like, hey, what happened to him? Like, why does he hang out with us? And it's just just a lot of assumptions,
right?
That usually it never goes well when you just assume things of people. Yeah. So I think that one definitely sucked. But
yeah, that can be hurtful.
Yeah. And then so for me, I was like, dude, I'm a good friend. Like what? Like I'm pretty sure I didn't do anything wrong. Like, why did this happen? Yeah. Rough life.
Yeah. I feel like I went through that too, like where I think I like asked myself, like, did I do something? So basically, like, I mean, I think in my 20s I had like, you know, a pretty good group of girlfriends. All prior to kids, you know, when I had time to hang out with my girlfriends alone. But it was, but we were all like friends at church, you know, we like had mutual activities and we saw each other pretty often. But then, you know, like one by one, like people just had like, you know, like went elsewhere or they like, you know, had jobs that moved them elsewhere. And I just remember like one time just thinking to myself, like, man, like, you know, like sometimes those like darn like Facebook memories pop up and you're like, in this picture, who's left, you know, like, have you ever had that thought where you're like, wow, this is really depressing that I just thought that, but I feel like me and one other person are the only ones remaining. And, you know, and I really had a hard time with that transition. Like, you know, like I think in my head, I knew that not all friendships last forever. But I think like when that time comes, when that relationship changes to not forever anymore, and it's like a loss. It really is a loss of a friendship and a relationship. And I'm a Enneagram type 2, so relationships are like the core of who I am. And it's always hard for me to like let that go and to learn to let that go. And actually that has been something that I've actually had to learn, I think, in the past 10 years, to learn how to like let it go and be okay with that and to be grateful for the time that we had, but that it's okay to move on, make new friendships or not make new friendships, you know, and to create like a space in my heart to open up to people. I think I used to be like, oh, like so upset that like, you know, like I feel like I invested so much time in this relationship and now like all that was for nothing, you know, because we're not friends anymore and we don't see each other anymore. But no, like I think I've been learning to remind myself that like, no, this person contributed, helped me learn something about myself, or, you know, poured into my life and I grew because of this person. And now that person is like having to move on for whatever, then it's okay. Like it's time to like be happy for them and be happy for myself and just make a new friend or like do something different. But it's hard. Easier said than done. I think I'm still learning that.
No, it's super hard. Yeah, because like Same thing. I feel like there were definitely friendships that I thought I would have for life. Right. And I think we talked about this previously where, sure, some of them were like female friends, but I don't think it was ever on a romantic side. But regardless, I was like, oh, like, sure, maybe when I get married, like the friendship looks different, but would still be friends. Yeah. Cause then there was definitely like one where I was like, at some point something shifted and I wasn't even dating yet, but I was like, hey, I would like to think I was a little bit more mature at this point. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask to see if something has changed or like if this person thinks of our friendship differently. It's like, hey, are we still friends? And then she's like, yeah, we are. And then I'm like, but everything feels like really different. Like, I don't think you ever talk to me anymore or like whatever. And then the crazy thing was then for some reason, it was just became kind of toxic where I would hear that she would say stuff to like other people and like, oh yeah, this is why I'm like not really friends with Sam anymore. And I'm like, okay, that's unnecessary. And this channel is still open for you to like talk, but it doesn't happen. But I think in the same way that you mentioned, Iris, where it's like, it took me a while to recognize like how much I like valued these friendships because of my own, I guess, yeah, kind of what I said, the identity aspect of it, where I'm like, oh, I am a good friend. So like, if anyone is not friends with me, like I am now reflecting to wonder, did I do something wrong? And then I think the part is where, as I'm reflecting, sure, I may be like very forgiving and think to myself, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. So if I didn't do anything wrong, then why is he or she not my friend anymore? And then that's the part that like hurts the most, because then it's just, what? Like, what? I didn't do anything wrong. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, why did you leave or whatever? And then I think, so it was just letting go in the sense of, okay, friends are not, some friends are not meant to be, some friendships are not meant to be, and being okay with that. But it sucks. It sucks.
I know. And I think it's so interesting that you mention it on the aspect of relationships, because I even noticed that like when I got married, I feel like some of my guy friends, like we're not as close anymore. And that's fine, you know, but there's something about when you get married, like and you have like platonic friends on the opposite side where it doesn't gel that well sometimes. Like, why is that?
I don't know. I mean, I think there are some that I do feel like we still gel very well. I do feel like for me, it's like, I don't know if it's part COVID or like part like my profession change where I'm not on the computer all the time, where before it's very easy for me to just shoot people texts and keep in touch through that avenue. But yeah, I just don't feel I don't feel the desire anymore to like really just text all my friends all the time.
Yeah.
So, like,
No wonder I haven't been getting text
yeah, whereas before, right, when I was at Caviar, I'm just on my computer all day. Oh, I message easy, like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Hey. And then it's just, I'm bored. So like, please entertain me.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think at least for me, I personally have not felt much change because like I am now married and like friendships have been affected that way. Yeah. What about you, Iris?
I know. I'm asking myself that question too. I don't know. I mean, I think for me, the biggest change, and maybe I just don't remember after marriage, but the big change was after kids. Like a lot of my relationships changed after that point. And it was another thing that it was like another loss I kind of had to go through too, in becoming a parent. But then, I also, interestingly enough, also gained a lot of like new relationships that I never thought like, I could relate to this person. But because we both have kids now, we like find very common topics to talk about that are like actually important to us in this time of life. I always thought that was really interesting too, like, which I think has helped me now process like losing relationships is not always a bad thing. And that's why I had struggled so hard with that sometimes. Like, I think when you were talking about like, oh, like if I didn't do anything wrong, why, are they not friends? And you're like, there must be something about me they don't like anymore. Like you just kind of, your mind just goes there. But yeah, like I think, sorry, back to your question, I think it is when I became a parent. But I also now, like have gained like people, like there's a friend that I don't think I really even talk to her that much. But because now she's a mom and I'm a mom, like, now we'll randomly text about like mom things, you know? And, you know, it's very like satisfying because like, I'm like, you know, in my moments of like, I need mom people to understand my mom things, she's there. But yeah, yeah, relationships change, I think, just throughout time. And it's just one of the truths of life that I'm learning.
So is the lesson here just that relationships are functional? Because that's what I'm hearing from you, Iris. I'm just kidding.
I think
Yeah,
they definitely
just
do
kidding.
with like what's happening in your life at the moment. You
Yeah.
know, like they're directly correlated with that for sure. But I mean, I have a question for the both of you because I feel like in your talks about like, you know, losing friendships, you know, I probably got the other side where I don't know. It doesn't make me a bad person, but like, how do you like when things happen in a friendship, like how do you guys like deal with it? Like you guys were both saying you felt like a loss or like what happened? Like, did you guys confront those people? Or not confront, like you wouldn't do that to a friend, but did you try to bring it up or you just kind of let it slide and just be like, okay, I guess that's what it is?
I think in the specific example I mentioned, like, I just waited to see if I was imagining things. And then I would kind of ask around to my friends, like, hey, does anything seem different? And then once I think I realized it wasn't just my own assumptions, then I reached out. So maybe it wasn't as explicit as like a confrontation and hey yo we really need to
Right.
talk.
So serious.
Yeah, but it was just hey, just wondering, are we still friends? Yeah, but who knows, maybe like I don't know if maybe I could have tried it stronger. Like I don't know if that changes things, maybe not, who knows. But yeah, I think just going through in essence like a grieving process.
Yeah.
And then also being okay of like, right, maybe they do feel differently about me, like Iris said, and then being okay with more or less their opinions changing over time, and then kind of not letting that hold weight. Because I think a hard part of that was like, oh, I used to very much value this person's opinion because I felt like we were such good friends. And so the fact that this person's opinion has now soured, like what does that say about me if I, right, like because I valued it so much, and then now to kind of remove that value of opinion from like how I view the world is, you know, it's like a weird transition.
I think for me at the time, I was non-confrontational. I think I would just like figured it. I just dealt with it on my own. I was like, it's just how it is. And I like was upset and bitter inside, you know, like, and you know, sometimes like memories would pop up or you would like remember a thought and I'd just be like, this is definitely probably not the way to do it. I did what I
Delete.
yeah. I did what I was not probably supposed to do. It was like an unhealthy way. I just like kept it in. But I think I've also learned that throughout things, like I think I start to see like why things change and sometimes I think in that moment I'm like, oh, it changed because of this reason, or it's because of, you know, like they moved away or they changed or like, you know, it's because something. But I think like over time, like there was a friend that I, you know, in that grieving process in my 20s, like there was one friend, and you know what, now like after like 5 years we are friends again because our life stages have mashed up and like we still don't live in the same area, but like we are back to a season where we are friends again. Yeah, I don't see her as often and our relationship has changed because we were both running different circles now and our jobs are different. But like, you know, we are both moms now and we relate on that level. So I think I've learned to not take things also as serious and important and as precious as relationships are. I've also learned that like life is just, it's like you have to just be flexible and like, you know, relationships come and go, but they also can come back to you. And that's cool. And sometimes if they don't I just go with the flow, I guess.
Yeah. So for you, Francis, so you mentioned like you felt, is it that you haven't really had to kind of go through that process, or?
I feel like I've been on the opposite end where people are like,
Okay.
how come you're not friends with me anymore?
it.
And I'm like, no, it's not that I'm not friends with you. I just, maybe it's like I do have other things going on in my life and we don't have that much opportunity to cross paths or just like, you know, just around.
Cool.
Yeah, too cool. Yeah, cool.
No, not even.
Well, so then the real question is, right, so you mentioned that. So how was it like for you, I guess, on the quote unquote other side of that conversation there?
I think sometimes I don't know that like, I don't know, what is it? I guess I just feel like, nothing really happened. So I guess it's like I'm also caught off guard. And then when, of course, nobody likes to be confronted that way, but then it also does make me reflect. But I never think negatively about that. I'm just like, we're just in different places, and that should also be okay,
Yeah.
And it's not, but like my feelings for them are the same, but I think it's just maybe more of a loss for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, probably in friendship there's like reachers and stuff.
I'm like, am I a mean girl? Gosh.
I think that's true though, because I think that now I've also realized that like maybe on their end they didn't. I mean, they probably knew that things were changing, but it wasn't like malicious. It wasn't a personal thing. It's just things happened, and like they maybe were like their headspace wasn't at that time, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I don't know. I feel like it. Maybe sometimes time does heal certain things. But yeah, it helps me understand better, like, oh, at that time I felt so bad about this, but maybe it wasn't in reality that bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I've definitely had some friendships where I guess I'm on the quote unquote Francis side of it.
And then the poor Iris side, just kidding.
The poor Iris side, where Iris has never done this
I've
to
just been
any of her
left.
friends, right?
People
She's
keep
only
leaving.
been left. She's never done the leaving. Yeah, where
I'll give you an example, right? Like, and I shared it with you guys previously, but like, say, even going back to the 8 friends, right, that we're talking about. So I got married last year. I only invited the NorCal girls. I didn't invite the SoCal girls, and they got really, really upset. And they started phoning each other like, "Is Francis mad at me? Is something wrong? Like, why does she not like me anymore?" And it's like, it's actually none of the above. It's just convenience, and that I am actually just a little bit closer to these people, but I still love you guys. And so I'm actually having like a secondary dinner where I'm inviting everybody. But I think that's like a realistic, example of just how sometimes it's just what it is. But there really was no like ill will or anything behind that action,
Yeah.
well, so I also want to contrast it because I know you mentioned earlier that no one really wants to be confronted on the end of, hey, like what's changed? Especially if that person doesn't feel anything just changed. Do you feel like in this case, if like the SoCal girls had talked to you directly, like would you? I mean, I know you guys are having an amicable dinner like as a result of it and whatever, but would your feelings have been different if they had reached out to you directly versus you hearing through the grapevine?
That's such a good question, because I feel like if they reached out to me personally, I would have been like, they're so petty. But honestly, hearing it, that would probably be my first reaction. But then now hearing it through the grapevine of my other friends, it makes me even like more upset. So I'm not really sure, you know, because then I feel like, why are you, not that they're bullying my other friends, but why are they like just harping on them about it?
Right.
When it has nothing to do with them, you just come and ask me. But if you ask me directly, I probably would be really pissed at you.
Yeah, because I think I've noticed that too for myself, where like, sure, maybe there's an aspect that people are scared, like I'm just gonna like flip out on them. They ask me about something, but I've noticed for me, it's like if I hear from the grapevine, it's definitely worse.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yo, if you feel like our friendship has changed, like I don't want to hear that's how you feel through someone else.
Yeah.
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 Totally.
But yeah, because there's definitely been a case where I started noticing like maybe, well, I've also noticed this too, where like some people, as they're quote unquote being left, like they start to kind of overcompensate. And then for me especially, like the moment I can like
Feel it. Yeah.
feel and sniff that desperation, I don't want
You want to
anything.
run away.
Yeah.
I'm
like,
with
please
you
get
100%.
away. Yeah, so then I'm like, dude, why are these people trying to like overcompensate? And then I hear little rumblings through other people. I'm just like, oh man, what do I do? Like,
Desperation.
the right thing to do is to go and talk to them. I'm like, no, because you did this, like, it proves why I don't want to talk to you. As mean as that sounds, it's just like how it
I am the same way. I can't refute that at all.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I know we've gone over some, I guess, quote unquote, like bad DTRs or like lack of DTRs. I'm curious, like, have there ever been situations where you thought you had beef with someone and then maybe because you're able to sit and talk, then now you're like crazy good friends and you never saw that coming?
No, but I don't think in those exact terms, but I know there was this one instance for me where I was upset at my friend and then I just chose not to like engage. And I think you when I ice somebody out, and again, I'm so sorry that there's a part of me that's like that. But when I do that, like, you know it, you know, and kind of like what you're saying, where they're like trying to be like, hey, you know, and I just kind of like left it alone. But then one time I did actually, I was like, hey, let's go to lunch and let's actually like talk about it. And I think it actually felt so good afterwards, and our friendship is like nothing happened. So sometimes you do need those moments just to get back on the same page, to say your piece, not in a mean way, but just be like, hey, this is actually how I feel, and this is why like I did that, you know, or I started to be a little bit colder, you know, and also for them to be able to opine back, like that's a really good exercise. And we've been really good ever since.
See, so I had the opposite, where I really had to muster up the courage to confront somebody about our friendship and the current state that it was in. And I don't think we recovered at all. I think it's not the season for this friendship. But you know what? I think to my surprise, though, it was good for me to do that. Because usually, my husband would probably differ from this, but I'm usually a non-confrontational person, at least when it comes to my friendships. And I think generally I never really get into too much conflict with my friends. But this was like, I know. This is why I keep getting abandoned. That's a whole different topic that we need to talk about. I need help. But yeah, like, I think it's really interesting that, like, I was like, you know, I think I need to tell this person how I feel, like my real feelings and like the problem that I have, you know, and like, yeah, what I'm feeling about this friendship. And I did. And like, I think, I mean, nothing changed. If anything, it may have gone worse. But I think for myself, I was like, wow, like I actually finally said my side of things and like how I've been feeling, and it was extremely therapeutic for me. And I feel like, you know, for once, I feel like, yeah, it just felt like good to be honest. And like, there's, at least on my end, there's a clear conscience that I didn't leave, like, you know, like them hanging with like wondering what happened to this friendship. But that like I said my piece, and, you know, I offered, you know, like if you want things to change, like you're going to have to meet me somewhere on this. And yeah, so I mean, no happy ending there, but I
mean, at least it's good that you guys got to talk, because I do feel like there's a lot of, I mean, we've already gone over so many different examples where people just end up not talking.
Yeah.
And sure, there's like restitution actions that need to be made after these conversations, but to even get people, I feel, at the table is already such a impossible task. It feels that, I don't know why, we can just sit and talk.
But it's so hard.
I know.
Because there's so many like emotions and feelings that are behind it. And sometimes I think even after it's like hard to express it, you know, like in that conversation, I was like, I don't even know how to say half of what I feel, but you just do. Maybe sometimes through tears.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's like the vulnerability aspect of it, but then maybe you even need to have like follow-up hangouts or like chats where I'd be like, hey, I didn't get to voice everything I wanted to because I got like really flustered, or like, I'm sorry I came off too strong, and different things like that. But yeah, a lot of times, because then, at least, right, these grapevine examples that we've talked about, then you only hear about it through the grapevine. And I'm pretty sure that's usually only half the story, or it's already very distorted.
Yeah.
And then versus, hey, can we sit? Like, I've heard these things, or like, whatever.
You're right. Like, having to hear something through the grapevine makes everything so much worse, because it's like, you could have just come to me, right?
Yeah, it makes you feel like you don't even value me enough to, or value this relationship enough to like deal with it face to face.
Yeah. And then you got to start like 10 steps backwards, like from where maybe you were.
Well, so semi-funny story. I think I can use names for this one. But right, so like, my business partner is getting married, and that at one point, like, I guess me and Cece, his fiance, like, didn't get along the greatest, or like there was just like some icy tension. And then I just remember, like, over a period of time, I was like, oh, things feel like a lot better or whatever. But then like one would come and tell me stuff like, oh yeah, like Cece said this, or like whatever. And then I'd be like, oh, okay. And then stuff would happen, and then all of a sudden I would hear through the grapevine that like, oh, hey, Sam, Cece feels like some sort of way about you, or that like you said something about her. And I was like, I don't think what happened? And then so then I like hit up Cece. I was like, hey, I'm not sure what's happening, but like maybe we should sit and talk. And So we end up talking, and it's like, hey, I've heard you feel this way. Like, is that true? She's like, oh yeah, because like, didn't you like say or do this? Or I was like, no, I didn't. But then the crazy part was that we found out the root of the problem was actually Wun's communication. So like, whatever I would say, he would just misconstrue it and like blow it up to 100, and then that was the message that would get communicated to Cece. And then whatever Cece would do or say, he would blow it up to 100 and then send it back to me. So we're just like ready to go because he's like riled us up. And so like our solution for it was just, all right, from now on, if like one ever tells you something that I said and you're like, that seems a little off or like too harsh, please come message me directly and be like, hey, one said this, just want to know, like, is that what you meant? Like,
So did the both of you guys have a moment with him and sit him down and confront him? Like, what the heck,
no,
man?
we just told him like on the side, like individual. I was like, yo, this is all your fault,
Yeah,
dude.
exactly.
Like, what are you trying to do here?
No more middleman.
No more middleman. But right, I think that just kind of goes back to the grapevine, because then I do think people can color it, whether it's like from their own trauma or like their own hidden agenda.
Totally.
And then until like, yes, I understand, I totally realize that it is hard, but until the two parties come and sit, it's I feel like it's just you're hoping for the best, but you're like in essence planning for failure.
Yeah.
Because odds are it's not going to work out. Tough life. Gosh, one. Yeah. And then, so I guess another good story from like DTR is like me and like a really good friend now, like we used to just like growing up. It was like, I don't even know if it's even like a rivalry. It's just kind of, oh, I think he doesn't like me, so I don't like him, right? It's like, of course, boys being boys. Yeah, but then I think just throughout the years, like we end up, it was like during one retreat, like he came in and like asked me to pray for him, and then during like the breakout session, we just like sat and chatted, and then since then we've been like great friends. And this was Eric. Yeah, so it's like there, I do think there's like huge benefits, but a lot of times I don't know if it's just us being Asian, like wanting to save face, where I can't admit that, like it's weird because like I can't admit that I am hurt by what this person has said. And so like, because I can't admit that, then I don't want to come to the table to have this conversation. Any examples from you guys?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think too. I mean, we're just talking about confrontation and just being real with like friends. I mean, that's always been a very sore point for me, because I think a part of it is also like when we're Asian, because you have to admit, it's almost like you have to take, there's a responsibility piece of it, the relationship, that you have to admit that like maybe I did something to hurt that person too. And I think that part, until you have the maturity or like, the resolve to like deal with that and to accept that responsibility, it's hard to then have a productive conversation with the other person, because you'll probably end up in a blame game or like feeling even worse. And that's something that I feel like is hard. And in the previous example that I was talking about, in like that the relationship where I had to confront that friend, I think I had to kind of like soul search a bit before I had this conversation, because I realized that like, I probably have equal responsibility in this relationship. I think like when you're just like, oh, it's all their fault. And I realized that's probably not a good mentality or ever a good mentality, even though like, your relationship will probably never be the same again. But like, I think it's still important to try to honor whatever you did have and honor them as a human being and have respect. But sometimes I think in the heat of the moment, with all the emotions and all the like sentiments behind it, it's hard to really do a deep dive on yourself and be like, what was my responsibility in this? And having to be okay with, like asking for forgiveness or asking for them to understand like whatever situation that was. So, yeah, it's hard.
Well, so in that situation, so I know you mentioned, right, it was good for you. And it's like part of that is like the soul searching. What other aspects of it do you feel like it helped you, I guess, just grow, even though maybe like the friendship and the kind of like what you're hoping to come from the conversation didn't actually go that way?
I think a part of it is also learning how to share my feelings verbally. I think a lot of times like you process so much in your head and you're just like, oh, like this is how I feel. But like when you actually have to verbalize it out and like say it in a way that is like constructive or understandable for somebody, that I feel like that's a whole different like skill set in a way that's not like hurtful. And having to like process those emotions. I think that's probably something that I had to learn from that too. And I think what I was talking about earlier too is just having to learn to try to look at it from their angle. And that is, it takes so much humility, like, because that is probably the number one thing you don't want to do when you have a confrontation is try to understand from them. But I think when you're put in that position and you can do that, even if things don't end up being the same, or you don't end up being friends after that, but it helps you, I think, internally, at least for me, let go of things, like to let go of the bitterness or to let go of the disappointment or the frustration or the expectations. You know, it just helps you to be like, you know what, like, it's okay, they're human. I'm human too, and I've probably done things that maybe they haven't told me about yet. But yeah, let me just try to grow from this. Try. But it's a process. Like I think even after having a talk, like you said, like sometimes you need to have follow-up talks, or sometimes, you know, you still have those thoughts where like, oh, I'm upset at this person again, or this friendship, or like, why did I have to be friends with this person, or why do we have to get to this point? I thought we'd be buddies forever. And I think it's like we all talked about, it's a grieving process, or it's a learning process where it happens in waves, and like you let go little by little, hopefully over time.
Yeah, I do think like at a certain point, like if it just you keep getting hurt from like the same people,
You gotta cut the cord.
It's time to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Time to cut your losses.
Yeah.
As much as it hurts, it's probably healthy.